Namaskar. I am Taruna Chaudhary from Kurukshetra University, Kurukshetra. To begin with, I am delighted to be a part of this refresher course, and I acknowledge my deep sense of appreciation towards Professor Joshi for giving me this opportunity to be a part of UGC HRDC programs being conducted by them. HRDC Gujarat University has so many milestones to its credit, and it's a privilege. I feel myself to be privileged to being a part of this particular program, that is the refresher course with the theme value education. And once again, I acknowledge, I put on record my thanks to Professor Joshi, Director, HRDC Gujarat University, for allowing me to be, for giving me this opportunity to be a part of this program. Coming to the topic, value education seems to be the buzzword in this field of our teaching learning process. And it's not something new. It's been with us. Value education, the component of value education has been with us for the last many decades. Policy planners, the personnels dealing with the process of education, they've been putting across some emphasis, continuous emphasis on what is value education, how best can we deliver the teaching learning process that moves towards nurturing, that moves towards enhancing or inculcating the value amongst the learners. Somehow, in spite of all these efforts, in spite of our consistent focus of academia towards this, we still come across some pits, some gaps, and identify that we have a long way to go. When we look around us, it becomes obvious that there is something that needs to be done to bridge those gaps. And this is precisely the reason why probably HRDC Gujarat University has decided to take up this theme of value education for this refresher course. Friends, the topic that I have chosen for this particular slot is value education, percept to practice. Let me tell you that do not expect anything from me to tell you what is value, what are values, what is the basis of it. You and I assume that the participants in this particular program, they are senior teachers. And this connotation, this concept is nothing new to us. My primary focus of interacting with you, my primary focus and of interacting with you would be to bring across the behavioral aspect of it. Like you and I, in the field of education, what are the aspects that we need to keep, to include in our dealing with our students? The content, the strategies, our interaction with the students? How do we take it up as a separate subject, or it's all encompassing, that throughout the length and breadth of our education system, the content, whatever that we talk of, do we go across to that? And that is why, once again, I would like to repeat it, that the topic is value education, percept to practice. Not just talking about it, not just a theoretical consideration of it. That is my assumption, that we are all well versed with the theoretical part of it. What does it do to us? What are the benefits of value education? No, I'm not going to be talking about that. But what I'm going to do is that what can we do in our classroom situations, in our field of karma kshetra? What can we do in our karma kshetra during the length and breadth of it, which can actually bring us closer to the point where we see the difference, where we can feel the difference of doing our bit in our teaching learning process. Not a specific mention of, okay, let's talk about value education, but in our daily stream, in our continuous process, on it, and the behavioral interaction, the classroom situations, be it just delivering the content, analyzing the content, or evaluating the content through that. To begin with, let's talk. We need to understand why are these gaps. To begin with, striving to live is common to all living beings. We human beings are luckier. We are lucky enough to be blessed with intelligence, ability to imagine, think and decide, and with all these move ahead on the basis of our experiences. The experiential learning. Living, striving to live is common to all living beings. But let's acknowledge this fact. Let's appreciate, let's be grateful to the nurture, to the nature around us, nurturer, that Almighty, that we are blessed with intelligence, ability to imagine, think and decide, and move ahead based on our experiences. But this comes with there's a tag with it. No doubt, we are blessed with it. But the nurturance and promotion of these abilities is must. We need to create a conducive environment where the ability that we are blessed with, that is intelligence, ability to imagine, think and decide, these abilities, these blessings need to be nurtured. We require opportunities, resources, and guidance. Opportunity, resources, and guidance by parents, by teachers, by the society. Because when we say that we are blessed with intelligence and ability to think and move ahead, that is on the basis of our experiences. And where do we get those experiences? The experiences we get by the opportunities that are provided to us by our parents, teachers, and society. This, in a nutshell, in the field of education, you will agree that our education or the development is influenced by the tripolar process of our family, school, and society. That's what I was trying to bring across to you. To that point, if right now I ask you that think of any 2 or 3 things about yourself that you are proud of. List those things. Take a note, make a note of those things. Still further, list the things, 1 or 2 things that you do not like about yourself. Make a note of it. Make a list of it. When you look at those things, the points that you have noted for yourself, those act as a reflection for you. Those pointers that you note down, that the time you spend on thinking, recalling what you like, what you're proud of yourself, and what you don't like. Those particular aspects that you write about yourself, that you identify about yourself, that you note down about yourself, they in a way reflect the person that you are. Those in a way reflect what you hold dear to yourself and what you aspire to be. In a very generalized term, in a very generalized aspects, those are indicators of the values that you hold for yourself. Though I did say that I'm not going to define what our values are, I'm not going to give you a theoretical component of what value and value education is. Just to put things in perspective, what are values? Values are a set of priorities, which form the basis of our personal ability to judge between what is right and what is wrong. I asked you to do two things, to make note of two things. List one or two things that you are proud of about yourself, as well as one or two things that you do not like about yourself. So that comes through your personal, that form that these are the values, these become a set of priorities that we hold for ourselves, or that form the basis of judging what is right and what is wrong. And this just does not come up in a day or so. This judgment about what is right and what is wrong. It's a deep rooted system of belief, which is given to us, or which has been with us, which comes to us from our family, the society that we live in, the culture that in which we grow up, our nurturing environment, our developmental. That's why I said in the beginning that we should consider ourselves to be blessed one, to the point that we are blessed with intelligence to think and decide. But the nurturance and promotion of these abilities is dependent upon the opportunities, resources provided to us by our parents, our education system, or the society for that matter. Relating it to the values with the activity that I mentioned about, that list the things that you are proud of, that you like, or something that you do not like about yourself. This gives us an idea about our value system. Value system that we define the deep rooted experiences, influences that we have had within our nurturing environment, developmental environment, those three things: family, school, and society. They shape our values, and we are able to judge for ourselves what is right and what is wrong for them. They are personal validations and may not be the same for everybody. And that is how this conflict. You may judge something to be, you may value something, but people around you may not value it to that point. So, what is value education for that matter? This is one pointer, one indicator that provides us with it, that we need to pay attention to it. Though we've been our different policies, different education system over the last many decades have been talking about it, but still we feel that there is something amiss. And The evidence to that is the latest, that is the National Education Policy 2020. Without going very much into the detail of it, if we were to pick the essence of it, there is an overwhelming emphasis on instilling the deep rooted pride in being Indian. It talks about the deep rooted pride in being Indian, not only in thought, not only just in thought, but in spirit, intellect, and deeds. That is what NEP 2020 brings us or aims for. Besides this, instilling the deep rooted pride in Indian, in not just in thoughts, but in our deeds too, in our spirit too, and in our intellect too, it also aims at developing knowledge, skills, values, and dispositions that take us towards this, that support responsible commitment to human rights, sustainable development, and global well-being. Bhartiyata, or with the common, the buzz or the latest or emphasis or focus, Atmanirbharta, Swabhiman, being independent, those things, the gist, or just which you can say the palpable tilt, palpable outlook that NEP talks about, NEP 2020 talks about, is this deep-rooted pride and development, instilling the sense of deep-rooted pride in Indianness and developing knowledge, skills, values, and dispositions towards that support to that matter, our commitment towards human rights, sustainable development, and global well-being. So friends, these sharing of these thoughts with you in reality forms the basis of my presentation, beginning that I'll pick up with this focus of our education system being on this, and the status that we come across will form my springboard, will be the springboard for taking forward this interaction, this talk with you to that point. Why do we, the question that arises is as to why do we see these? Why do we experience these gaps with us to that point? That we experience this gap looking around us, the knowledge explosion. This generation, taking into consideration our pervasive, the very fact that I am sitting at a remote location and I'm able to reach out to people in different geographies is indication of the explosion, knowledge explosion, the technological explosion that is. The knowledge explosion with easy access to global world has presented us with ample scope of progress, and has led to human being assuming the central place in the universe. The self, we have assumed the central place, and this self within human being has immense potential, but is laced with motives, needs, interest, and aptitude. It's not just a blank one, okay, just the self, but it comes with it. It brings across with it the motives, the needs. Why do we do it? Why are we going for it? Let me find it. Okay, if I do this, I'll come across this. So self has assumed a central place. The human beings have they've, it has almost come to be that we run this universe, whereas it's a symbiotic thing. The nurturance, the nature, or the different living creatures around us, we are each dependent on each other. But the knowledge explosion, the technological advancements, they have led us to believe that there's an ample scope of development, and knowingly or unknowingly, human beings have come to this the central place towards this. What has it led us to? Where has it taken us to that point that this one world phenomenon, the easy access that we are talking about, this one world phenomenon is easily experienced on a physical plane. So for us, access to material, accessibility of to other human beings, like human beings and material is concerned. On a physical plane, it seems that it's just a one world phenomenon. But deep within inside, where the human beings have assumed that central place, we've come to realize that there are infinite bits of mental plane that are concerned with self and closed to others. The self has assumed an overwhelming prominent position in our environment. The globalization of economy, the unimagined source of lust, greed, that's it's a fact. We have to come face to face with it. Lust, greed, and gratification that have somehow resulted in erosion of the human values. When I started my talk, I mentioned about that value education, values. Our education policies have been talking about it the past many decades. Still, when we come reflect on it, we do find the gaps. And that is why even our latest education policy realizes and somehow pitches us to pay attention to the steep sense of pride, deep rooted pride, and taking us to the that we pay attention to sustainable development and the global well-being. It talks about global well-being too, for that matter. That's what the situation has led us to. Looking out, when we look around, what we find that around us, because in when I said that this on a physical plane, the explosion of knowledge, technological advancements, they have brought about spectacular scientific achievements that indicate material prosperity, our ability to carry out so many things with the help of technological advancements. We are able to make predictions, we are able to go deep into the reasons for a particular phenomenon to taking place. That are spectacular scientific achievements, and we got to be proud of it. But while doing so, the fallout has been the human being assuming the central place with prominent focus on self and being close to others. The other side of the coin is that large section of mankind, humankind, human being, is still under the grip of frustration, immorality, self-centeredness, and corruption. These things are going side by side. Can we do something about it? It is here that we need to pause. We need to go back. We need to go back to the activity that I mentioned, to the list, to the notes that we made about ourselves. Like, what is it that I'm proud of myself, and what is it that I don't like, which give me an indicator. So, to that point, the much needed ingredient. Here we realize that the much needed ingredient for furtherance of humanity, based on the principle of sustainable development, that clearly states sustainable development and global well-being, what were they? That meeting the needs of present generation without compromising the needs of future generation. This is what we need to aim at. The National Education Policy 2020, when it talks about instilling a deep rooted pride in Indianness, not just in thoughts but in our deeds also, as well as developing the much needed knowledge, skills, and resources that would form the basis of moving towards humane development, sustainable developments, and global well-being, where we can arrest the erosion of our value system. So, arresting the erosion of our value system is the core. How do we go about it? Value education. Value education is a resource that we have, but we have to go from percept. There, we have to make a movement from just percept to the practice part of it. It's only the practice that will bring about a much needed change to that particular point, a much needed change. So, what's the task ahead for us? What this academia, the teachers in that way, in our interaction, what can we do? Or how can we play our role effectively in arresting this erosion of values? And maybe one of the steps, that's a strategy that we need to move from percept to practice. That has to be calculated. So what do we need to do? The task ahead for us is to cultivate the energies and behavior of young ones. Energies and behavior of young ones in a manner that they grow up to be responsible citizen. Not just responsible citizen with desirable attitude. That is the task ahead for us, the educators. What's the way out for us if that's the task ahead for us? How do we move ourselves from percept to practice? Effective learning process is a natural Effective learning process is a natural and an obvious recourse that one is inclined to turn to in the attainment of this objective. Easier said than done. Effective learning process. Does that mean that whatever teaching that we are doing about has not been effective? It has been. Yes. But can we do something? Is there anything associated with it that while our teaching learning process, we can claim, like any one of you can claim, that I have been a very good teacher, my so and so students have reached that height, they have made so much progress in their field. That's because of your teaching. Yes, you rightly claim that. But what we are focusing on is that maybe they have made spectacular scientific advancements. They have made spectacular advancements in the field of study. But that assuming that central plays the erosion of values, being constantly hounded by frustration, erosion, corruption, immorality, or not being, or being concerned about that they are not being valued for this. So, how do we arrest that? How do we do that? That way out, effective learning. What are the strategies? What can we talk? what can we do differently to quote or to strengthen, to reinforce our content teaching, our knowledge, the knowledge that we impart with developing these behavioral changes that ultimately lead them to well-being, that not just not just enhance enhance the their attainment levels or their knowledge level, but also cater to the well-being. This would become when they are not, when they can think beyond self, accept others, and be open to others. That global well being can be achieved only through that. And that's how we can arrest the erosion of those values. So, the next part that I'll be talking about is that there will be an attempt to address the genuine concerns of the world population for a better world, the genuine concerns for a, for a world that aims to look for global well-being, not compromising the needs of self. It's not that okay, it doesn't matter whether I get it or not, but let me do it. Until and unless you are happy, until and unless an individual is happy, satisfied, cannot do much for others. If you recall that when we are in a flight, the instructions that we get before they start, tell us that in case of an emergency, this is the oxygen balloon that you get, put it around your nose, but before helping others, put that oxygen vent on yourself. That's what exactly I'm trying to say. That opening up to others by understanding the self, not self centered, but you and we survive in a symbiotic relationship with others. There will be an effort to address these concerns. Along with this, highlight the important personal attributes of our workplace, of individuals in our workplace, the students, the teachers, our co-workers, the administration, the management. Like how can, in relation to the society, how these together can work around each other, as well as propose some learning strategies, some teaching learning strategies to arrest, to develop, to instill this deep rooted sense of pride, as well as to develop the knowledge, skills, and dispositions to aim for, to arrest this erosion of value. And that is how I feel that we can move from percept to practice. You must come across people that who are on a verbatim, they can go on and on, tell you what are values, what are ethics, how do you differentiate between these two, and what is morality. They can, they can have so much of theoretical base, and it's important to have that theoretical base, because until and unless you understand something conceptually, how do you put it into practice? But my focus here is limited to proposing the strategies, proposing what on a simple level. I'm not suggesting any model for that, but one on a simple level in our day to day behavior, the changes that we can bring across. And this gives, this particular belief is strengthened by this Indian thought, that deep sense of pride in our enemy. The thought behind education, if we talk of, there is the two, not opposing, but two different thoughts I'll share with you. That one thought proposes that the man is not, that we are not a part and parcel of nature, and we can exploit these things exist for us, and we can exploit it to any extent for our pleasure. This is one thought when we look at, and when you see the scientific advancements, like if you're going on cutting the trees, or for that matter, you are going on digging something to find out what lies underneath it, and not paying attention to the other, that the soil erosion that is taking place. So there's one thought of education. Another thought of education behind education is that, and that's predominantly Indian thought, that also highlights the acceptance of harmony between man and nature. I would say within humans and nature. To that point, it perceives that the same soul, the same Atman in man as in present in other living creatures. It's a part of that srishti, the universe, and all these things are in a symbiotic relationship with the environment. Not just the physical environment, our social environment, our emotional environment. And this particular thought, Indian thought, draws a strength from the fact that the belief that we have, that God has created human beings for a special purpose: to live, to help others live, and to provide further for what we can for future generation. To live, to help others live, and to provide further for future generation. And friends, this is nothing else but forms the core of our sustainable development. That talks about that meeting the needs of the present generation without compromising the needs of the future generation. If there has been, if we just focus, if we assume the human being as the central place, it's only my gratification, it's only the self gratification that matters, and we are not concerned about the others, then you are compromising. You are not contributing to global well being. Global well being means that assuming yourself as a part of the same universal srishti, that other living creatures, other non-human creatures, that universe, that we are, God has created us for this special purpose: to live, to help others live, and to provide further what we can for our future generations. This brings us to introspect. This brings us to a point where we need to introspect, for that matter. It's a fact that human beings have an inherent capacity. It's a fact that our education system has inherent capacity to influence the current and future generation. What does it take us further to? That persons concerned with the process of education need to take into account this aspect of man's function. In that entire economy of God's creation, to live, to help others live, and to leave something for future generations. In spite of the gigantic advancements, in spite of these many advancements that we have, and the well-intended effort to benefit, somehow we feel that it is not percolated down to the individual level where we can see the harmonious growth and development. Why is it so? Let's talk about it. Why is it so to that point? To this, I would give a word of caution and remind you. I'm reminded of a famous quote that I personally actually believe in a lot. Let us not look back in anger or forward in fear, but just move around in awareness. Many times, these values, these conflicts, this the frustration, the dissatisfaction that we feel across us is because we are angry at what wrong has been taken with us. Let's not look back in anger. If something is, if we have not been treated well, if somebody has not treated us well, or we have not been given our due, don't look back in anger or in fear. Oh, if I do this, something bad is going to fall me. I am going to be punished for it. No. Whether I'll be able to do it. Do not look back in anger or in fear. Just move around in awareness. Be conscious of what's happening. Be aware of what's there. And that is the best way. That is, I would say, the easiest. That makes things so easy for us to move from percept to practice. Talking about moving around in awareness, I am tempted to even recall one very popular poem. Uh, in somewhere you'll find that it's been attributed to the His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and there are other you'll find that this has been penned down by Bob. That's the paradox of our time. The paradox of our time, it's a very lengthy one, but I'll just pick up few things that when we are moving around in awareness, it so meaningfully highlights that aspect that we have multiplied our possessions but reduced our values. We have multiplied our possessions but reduced our values. We talk too much, love too seldom, and hate too often. There is another thing that in a way puts into perspective what the phase that we are going through. We have taller buildings but shorter tempers, wider freeways. We have 6 lane, 4 lane, 8 lanes, wider freeways but narrower viewpoints. So maybe sometimes when you have some time, please go through this poem, that entire lengthy poem. With these having these ideas, these thoughts in the background, what can we do about the teaching as teaching professionals in our teaching learning process? To that, I mean, the best thing to connect our strategies, designing our strategies, would be to remind ourselves what Dr. Radhakrishnan said about education. The famous um, concept that he put across about education was that education is not limited to the imparting of information or training of skills. What is it? He went further to tell us that it has to give the educated a proper sense of values. Now, these quotes, friends, it's very important to delve deep into the quotes that have been presented, not remember them as verbatim. Memorizing is not the only thing. Memorizing it, but reflection, the introspection that I mentioned about right in the beginning to talk about, that is how we move from percept to practice. We have to move from that verbatim. That what lies within, what does it say? That education is not limited to imparting information or training of skills, but it has to lead the educated, it has to instill in the educated a proper sense of values for that matter. And To that, we also have people telling us that Aurobindo says that nothing can be taught. What Dr. Radhakrishnan told us, that it has to get instilled in them that a proper sense of values. But on the other, like, how do we do that in that process? Sir Aurobindo tells us that nothing can be taught to the mind which is not already concealed as a potential knowledge. It has to knowledge in the unfolding of the soul of the creature. That the inner potential has to be acknowledged, is to be realized. So whatever training strategies, whatever strategies that have to work around, that we have to work around, of course, information and knowledge, we build it up from information and knowledge. From information to knowledge to wisdom and foresight. This is the cycle that goes. So the issue is, how do we put into motion this cycle of information, knowledge, wisdom, and foresight for that matter? To that, if we can just like for putting things into perspective, like where can we focus our attention, the best strategies that we can think of moving from percept to practice, developing, instilling, nurturing interpersonal values and empathy. Whether we are teaching quantum physics, whether we are teaching state of the matter, or it's an algorithm, or the socialization process, while teaching those things, what has to be kept in mind besides the content that is being delivered, that completes the education process, is the focus on nurturing interpersonal values and empathy. Ability to constructively express and regulate one's feeling. Still another thing. Ability to understand others' point of view. How often do we come across these things that somebody is telling us something, but we, instead of just paying attention to what is being said, we start processing it with our own thoughts. Ability to understand others' point of view. And finally, cultivating social skills. The four things that I'm putting across right now is that what are the strategies on which we can base on that, how do we go about it, move from percept to practice, cultivating or nurturing interpersonal values and empathy, constructively regulating and expressing one's feelings, regulating one's feelings, ability to understand others' point of view, what the other person is going through, what the other person has to say, and cultivating social skills. How do we go about it? How do we deal with it? The simile that I can bring across here is that in terms of education, like when we say that I am holding such and such degree, a degree may initially open the door of employment to me, but education ensures my employability. That is something that we have to take in, and to that we'll have to see to it as teachers, as educators, that disciplinary knowledge along with professional training in humane pedagogy, disciplinary knowledge along with humane pedagogy is the way forward for us to put our best foot forward in instilling that deep rooted sense of Indianness, or for that matter, like bringing across, arresting the erosion of values that we are witnessing, what is happening around us. And the best, I don't claim that this is the best, but the best possible way that we can do in cultivating social skill, interpersonal skills. I find a personal recourse to the concept of dialogue within our education process, in our day-to-day dealings with our students, depending upon dialogue. What is dialogue? David Bourne has given us a very he has given us a lot about, and even the behavioral aspect of this. He even tells us about what are our behavior that support the process of indulging in dialogue. He says that one might think of dialogue as a stream of meaning flowing among and through a group of people, among and through a group of people that ultimately gives us a new understanding of something creative. We talked about cultivating social skills, interpersonal values, constructively expressing and regulating one's feeling. So, what what is common in these aspects is the interdependence, not emphasis on self-centeredness, but being in harmony with others, with nature, with our environment. That is how we will be in a position when we open our views, open it up. To that point, the concept of dialogue, the process of executing the concept of dialogue is very, very relevant in this field. That it's a we can look at dialogue as a stream of meaning flowing among and through a group of people to arrive at a new understanding. That when we are attempting to arrive at a new understanding, we are in a way making an effort to understand others' viewpoint. Dialogues primarily focuses on learning and collaboration. It's a living process where how do we put into motion the concept of dialogue? By dialogue, I'm not. We have to just put aside that the best dialogue writer award goes to this and this. I'm not talking about that dialogue. I'm talking about how do we communicate, how do we interact in our education process. That the relationship between the teacher and the taught within the class, relationship between and among the teacher community to that and the academia, how do we go about increasing our understanding about the things world around us. That is disciplinary knowledge, and supplementing it with the humane pedagogy. Humane pedagogy to that dialogue is an important aspect, and you realize when you reflect upon it. It's a learning, it talks about learning and collaboration. That when we are open to letting go of the known and open to knowing what is not known to us. Many a times, what we are so stuck in whatever is known to us that we are not open to something new. So dialogue says it's a stream of meaning flowing among and through people for a new understanding. For a new understanding. So the first thing that it focuses on is learning with collaboration, in collaboration with others. It's about dialogue is about what we value, discovering who we are, discovering how our relationship with others in the company of others, how much are we receptive, how much are we ready to be influenced, as well as leaving our point, leaving our views, sharing our views, that not imposing but putting it across as opening it to others for them to perceive the same way. That is how we will move around respecting others' point of view, understanding others' point of view. A dialogue in a way provides us with a fuller picture, not in bits and pieces. Fuller picture in our education, and that what is happening, what has it led to, and what is likely to happen. That is the fuller picture. So this openness provides us, in this concept of dialogue, provides us with that perspective where we will be able to appreciate others' contribution to adding on to our own understanding. And the learning is not rigid, learning is not fixed, it's not compartmentalized, but presents it with a fuller picture. In other words, you can say that just the basic concept or just the stage of carrying out this dialogue process is a community-based process, which has an inbuilt feature of pushing us to a stage, pushing us to a platform where we collaborate with others. When we collaborate, it's important that there are no egoism, or in a way, I would say that it directly, indirectly promotes interpersonal relationship to that point. What are the behaviors? Let's talk about it, so that what kind of behavioral dispositions promote or facilitate the process of carrying out this dialogue. How do we do that? First and foremost, think the first and foremost behavior that is very, very helpful in promoting, in carrying out this process of dialogue is the suspension of judgment. Suspension of judgment. What do we mean by it? Many a times, when we enter a new place, or just this concept, like in our education process, I'm sure you are from like from different subjects. A stereotype, you can say, is that girls are not good at maths, or maths is a scary subject. So, for that matter, if I remain stuck to this concept that maths is a scary subject, or is a heavy, or is a difficult subject, and I do not leave this judgment of mine, I will continue to, even if I have the ability, I will continue to perceive mathematics as a difficult subject, and will not even attempt to use any of my abilities to even understand the basic concept. So, to get a fuller picture, to have that interpersonal relationship, to learn how to constructively express and regulate our feelings, or even understand that what is it to be together, what is it to move out of this, there is a suspension of judgment. When you suspend a judgment, you create a climate of trust. When you, as an educator, when you suspend a judgment, oh, so and so is coming from such and such a vernacular medium school, the person is that student is not intelligent, so intelligent that we talk. When we suspend that judgment for a moment, for sometimes, we create a climate of trust. And even the students, for that matter, you create that for them. That if maybe they have heard your reputation that you are a very strict and you are a very disciplinarian, and they will hesitate in coming forward with their difficulties. So for that matter, how do we develop those interpersonal relations? It's important to suspend judgment for some time. Learn to open the door to see others' view. When we open the door to see others' view, others' point of view, a sense of that closeness, that trust, that the space between our judgment and the new understanding. When we mentioned in the beginning that it's a stream of meaning flowing through and among the people, flowing among and through the people. The space that you create provides you to listen more carefully, to comprehend, to let that concept stay with you. And the second behavior that supports, that takes it forward, is the assumption identification. Assumption identification, to that point, when you supposing you have had some assumptions about it. Why did I do like this? When you raise that question, that because assumptions play a large role in how we receive, respond, react, and make those decisions on that part. Was I right? When you try to edit, am I right if I'm thinking that this is going to happen? Can there be another way out? These questions, these spaces, these assumption identification put you on a platform where you, without making any effort, you become open to receiving other perspective. You're not stuck. You're not just stuck at that, but you are open to receiving, to listening. And that brings us to another important behavior that supports dialogue is the active listening. What's active listening and what's passive listening? Listening is something that stays with you. When you hear something and it stays with you. Actually, when you listening is the key to perception. Listening is very important. Sensation, there are dozens of sensations going around us. But when we listen actively, when we pay attention to those sensations, that takes us to perception. That is a meaning. Some meaning is added onto it. The way we listen has a lot to do with our capacity to learn. The way we listen has a lot to do with our capacity to learn and build quality relationship with others. Friends, many a times it happens. We are sitting in a place, in a group, somebody starts to speak, and immediately, rather than listening to what is being said, we reach the judgment level. Judgment. Oh, ये तो बहुत अच्छा बोल रहा है. ये क्या बोल रहा है? कहाँ चले गए हम? On the evaluation, on the judgment part of it. So the way we listen has a lot to do with our capacity to learn. Listening is the key to perception, and for that matter, it's the active listening. Suspending, when we are listening, we should suspend our judgment, identify our assumption, and pay attention, create that space. When we listen deeply, we are willing to be influenced by and learn from others. When we are only listening to judge, then we are not ready, we are not willing, or we are not even receiving the new perspective. Dialogue. What is dialogue? A stream of meaning flowing among and through people. And how do they flow among and through people? When we are open to it. And why are we letting them flow in the first place? Why? Because we want to arrive at a new understanding. We want to arrive at a situation, we want to ready ourselves to identify our imagination, to identify our assumptions for that matter. That is what we have to look at. That is what we have to identify for that matter. So listening involves developing our ability, listening, that active listening, developing our ability to perceive the meaning arising, perceive the meaning arising both at individual level and at the level of group for that matter. So this is another behavior, listening, active listening, that promotes, that in a way promotes our promotes, I would say, the ability to suspend, to identify our assumptions, as well as to ability to suspend our judgment. Another behavior that supports carrying out the process of dialogue is that inquiry and reflection. These are two very important aspects. Inquiry, because inquiry elicits information, and reflection permits the inspection of that information. When we say suspension of judgment, inquiry and reflection facilitates suspension of judgment, assumption of identification, and in that the intervening is that active listening, leading us up to further to inquiry and reflection. Inquiry permits an individual, when we're trying to learn, when we're trying to understand, gather new perspective, respect for others' point of view, it's very important to take recourse, to develop this habit of inquiring, eliciting information, identification, assumption identification. And on that, if we couple that with reflection, reflection provides us with an aware that we allows us to inspect, inspection of our information. That's how we develop a fuller picture that dialogues talks about. And that's how we learn with collaboration. How do we weave these different behaviors to create a fuller picture, or to carry out this process where we get support to nurture interpersonal values, empathy, respect for others' views, cultivating social skills. It is the fine points, fine aspects, fine attitudes, or fine actions that weave this entire process of dialogue process. When we begin to draw aside, starting from suspension of judgment, that allows us to draw aside the curtain on our judgment for some time. It's not that you just forget about what you're thinking, the ideas that you have formed, the thoughts that your own experiences, how you have shaped them. Just draw a curtain for some time. Develop the capacity to speak. When you inquire, you reflect, and you identify your assumptions. You develop the ability, the capacity to speak and listen without automatically coloring your past thoughts. Oh, no, this person is doing this because he must be thinking about it. Leave that. Draw a curtain on that judgment for some time. When we do this, when we create this space between what we are listening and suspension of judgment, when we create that, when we are in a way initiating the climate of trust, we become less reactive. Remember one of the lines in that paradox of our time, that we love seldom and we hate often. We talk too much, we love seldom, and we hate too much. So when we draw aside this curtain, when we draw this curtain, when we develop the capacity to speak and listen without automatically coloring our thoughts, we become less reactive. We are ready to listen to others. We become more aware of what's happening around us rather than just the self-centeredness. We become more aware of the assumptions through which we filter our observations. That's what. And it's then we realize, and there are many times we come across, we are so surprised with ourselves. Oh, is that why I was thinking like this? Then we open ourselves and we open our window. We create a space, we reflect, and this inquiry and reflection facilitates our rigidity or the stereotypes. Like we negotiate our belief, we start to negotiate our beliefs also, for that matter, and we open ourselves to others. Then it's here that we start this ability respecting the differences. If there's a difference of opinion, or if there's a difference of view, that does not mean that one is right and the other is wrong. It's just that it's a difference of opinion, and we have to gel together, we have to collaborate, the focus is on learning, not proving somebody wrong or proving ourselves right. That is not the focus. The focus is on learning, that education. It's only then what our scholars have said, that education is not imparting of information, of training of skill, but it's the value, respecting, instilling that value. And to that, there is nothing that can be taught from outside which is not already concealed. It's just education changes that which is concealed as a potential within. So the focus is on learning, cultivating interpersonal values, empathies, that we are not get deeply embroiled in the paradox, but we are moving ahead in our awareness and initiating that cycle of information, knowledge, wisdom, and foresight, for that matter. With this, I'm coming to the concluding part. But here in this concluding part, I'll attempt to tell you that what we are the interaction that educators and teachers have, and what we go through, the three things, that the three D's, that is dialogue, discussion, and debate. Many a times there's a very thin line divide that. So how best can we weave this fuller picture, learning with collaboration, in cultivating these interpersonal values? Let's try to understand. This is my last part of this talk. Let's where I'll differentiate between dialogue and discussion, and dialogue and debate, for that matter. Just a point of it, that dialogue is about learning, whereas debate is about winning. In dialogue, we are ready, we are open, we collaborate with others to develop a new meaning, to develop a new understanding. Whereas in case of debate, it's either right or wrong. It's that cutting, like thinking of an argument where you prove the other person wrong. It's combative. Dialogue is collaborative, and just the opposite of it, that debate is combative, where you are in dialogue, you are listening to understand and find a basis for agreement, whereas it's just the opposite. We are listening to find flaws. In debate, we're listening to find flaws and make counter argument to that point. In dialogue, we are searching for strength and values in the other positions. What are they saying? We are creating that space. We are suspending our judgment in dialogue. And we are looking for strength. We are discovering new possibilities and opportunities in case of dialogue. But in the case of debate, when we are debating to that point, we are searching for weakness. We are not searching for strength. Dialogue searches for strength. Debate searches for weakness and the flaws in the opposition, as well as we are seeking on the one hand, in dialogue we are discovering new possibilities and opportunities, but in debate we are seeking an outcome that agrees with your position to that point. So it's these fine points when we are interacting, the strategies that we are looking for, or in while imparting disciplinary knowledge, how do we create that humane pedagogy that would lead us to moving smoothly, effortlessly, seamlessly from percept to practice, that it will bring about a change in that human behavior, arrest the erosion of those values. When we can exist in a symbiotic relationship with one another, with ourselves, with one another, and with our environment. So another comparison that I wish to make over here is between that dialogue and discussion, because these are the strategies that we follow in our daily routine, in our classroom setting. That dialogue is aiming at inquiring to learn. Discussion is to sell, to convince that this is what, to convince or persuade. Whereas, what does dialogue say? That it's a stream of meaning flowing among and through people, where we create a space to identify our assumptions. Dialogue unfolds shared meaning. But what is discussion doing about is to gain strength on one meaning. That because we are attempting, we are not in debate, we are opposing it, we are finding flaws in it. But in dialogue and discussion, what is there? That dialogue is unfolding the shared meaning. Discussion is focusing on gain agreement on the one point, one meaning that one is trying to. Dialogue integrates multiple perspective. Discussion evaluates and selects the best possible. So when we put these three together, the dialogue, debate, discussion, this brief introduction about. I mean, we can have another full session on comparing these two and finding examples and that how we can, but just being alive, being getting acquainted to, becoming aware of that how these three different strategies, dialogue, discussion, and debate, that what is the best thing that can suit us. If we can just put these three into that point, dialogue is talking about uncovering and examining assumptions. Discussion is to justify and defend assumption. In dialogue, you are uncovering, you are examining your assumptions. In discussion, you are either justifying or defending your assumption. And in debate, to that point, you are listening to the flaws within the assumption and more attempting to make counter argument to that, right? Defending that view. So it's with these friends, uh, with these strategies or these behaviors, the behaviors, becoming aware of these things, how with the uh, best of knowledge, the disciplinary knowledge that we have about our subject, to that point, that adding or strengthening it or making it a habit, making it a part and parcel of experiences of dealing with people, combining disciplinary knowledge with humane pedagogy, that I think naturally comes out of our getting used to the dialogue mode of teaching, the dialogue, weaving the different behaviors that support the process of dialogue. We can aim, we can, we are hopeful that we will be able to cultivate, nurture interpersonal values, empathy, and the skills to constructively, each one of us has those feelings to express. Those are our basic needs, but constructively expressing and regulating. We talk so much of emotional quotient, etc., those things, and there are so many studies. But when we are dealing, when we are sharing these, somehow, because of our lack of, I would say, training or practice or even a conscious attention to those finer details, we miss out on these things. The ability to understand others' point of view, respecting differences, cultivating social skills. Friends, these are the 4 points that I wanted to make my presentation on. And I hope I have been able to put across these things not in a scattered way, but in a like a closed, compact, and in a sequential manner. And thank you all very much. With this, I wish you air to breathe, stay safe, fire to warm you, water to drink, and earth to live. Thank you all very much. Once again, in appreciation to the director of HRTC, Gujarati University, Professor Joshi, and his team. Thank you all very much.